Welcome, everybody. This is the Horn Takes podcast, your very rough around the edges Texas sports talk destination. I'm going to say some bad words. I'm going to say some things you probably don't like, but that's okay. I'm your host, Sean Redfern. It's Longhorn Friday Eve, and we finally got a game this week. Man, bye week is terrible. Bye week takes me right back to there's just no football, which is, again, if you've listened to the show at all, you know I'm very fond of baseball, and I can deal with college basketball. I mean, I can fan college basketball, but there's no better time of the year than college football. So not having football is terrible, and that means the last 2 weeks have been really terrible for me. And then you look at the fact that Texas was coming off of a loss and a loss to their heated rival, the Oklahoma Sooners. Man, it's just been a rough 2 weeks. So I'm glad we're right back on the cusp of having some football. Speaking of that loss at OU, disappointing, right? Texas has got to make the comeback better than the setback. Somebody said that, some famous rapper or some famous, I don't know, somebody that hypes people up said you got to make the comeback better than the setback. And that's what the Texas Longhorns have the opportunity to do down the road, down the stretch, these last 6 games of the season. And that's what they need to do. Deep Dive Thursday, we're going to get all statistical today. We're breaking down some stuff about them Houston Cougars and those Texas Longhorns and what that matchup might mean. Then, of course, we'll have some random college football thoughts. Check us out on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. Really appreciate it if you guys would follow and subscribe. Won't cost you guys a thing. I appreciate the support. By the way, I don't know if I've mentioned it. I probably mentioned it, but I'm going to mention it again. It was really cool at the Cotton Bowl and at the State Fair to have people come up to me, shake my hand, and tell me they like my TikToks, they like my content. I thought that was really cool. And I had several people in some videos after the Red River Shootout say, man, I saw you. I just couldn't get to you. For those that haven't been to the State Fair, on game day, it's just absolutely packed. And there's certain areas at the fair where everything gets condensed into these smaller little walkway areas. And if you see somebody on the other side of that, they're probably not going to be there by the time you get on the other side of that. So I thought that was pretty cool. I appreciate all the support. Thank you guys that reached out. You just like to listen to podcasts. You don't like to look at ugly people talk on podcasts. Check us out at horntakespodcast.buzzsprout.com or anywhere you listen to podcasts. So let's talk about this comeback. OU game was kind of an unexpected setback. You know, me and Nash talked on Monday about where we thought this Texas team was going to be before the season through 6 games and kind of where they ended up. I think 5-1 was a record that a lot of Texas fans would have been comfortable with if you said, hey, man, Texas is going to go 5-1 over their first 6 games. I think most Texas fans would say that's good, first of all. And that seems par. I mean, that seems like what they should do, right? But I think the game everybody thought Texas would probably go out and lose was that Alabama game. I don't think anybody was expecting that close of a game, and certainly not a loss to Oklahoma after the 49-0 last year. Just the trajectory that the program had been on, our program had been on since last year. I just think it was unexpected. And so, you know, I don't even think the team, you know, you always talk about, you know, I just think the team probably thought we're not going to lose this game. It probably never crossed their mind. That's okay. I don't think you want teams thinking they're going to lose games. But I think there's some teams that play against some other teams that no matter how boisterous they get, no matter how much false bravado they have, they know they're not winning that game. I think the team was confident headed into that game, and it just wasn't their day, man. Just too much stuff went wrong. Got to give Oklahoma credit because they caused some of that stuff. Just wasn't Texas's best football. And the only way to get past that is just forget it and move on. I say that. We've been talking about it for the last 2 weeks, but we haven't had shit else to talk about. And honestly, we haven't thrown it into a lot of conversations. Like, we haven't just been dwelling on it. It just kind of comes up sometimes in the course of a random college football conversation. So we're good here at Horn Takes Podcast. We're not dwelling on that Oklahoma loss at all. As a team, you got two choices when something disappointing happens, and this is for anybody, for anything, anywhere. Something doesn't go your way, you got two choices. You can sit there and sulk about it and try to figure out ways to blame everybody else but yourself. Or you can get prepared for the next opportunity and go kick the shit out of the next 6 teams if you're Texas. All gas, no brakes, baby. Let's see it for 6 games to wrap up the season. I said earlier this year, and I said it before the season even started, this Big 12 fuck you tour that Texas is on is a great opportunity to just Bob Stoops everybody. 2008 Oklahoma Sooners and Bob Stoops knew they were going to be in a 3-way tie at the end of that Big 12 season with Texas Tech and Texas Longhorns. And they went out and, I won't say they stole it, but they kind of did. They went out and beat 6 straight teams or 5 straight teams by 60 points, scored 60 points on 5 straight teams. And they got selected to go play in the national championship game because of that. So Texas is now sitting in the same type of predicament where the opportunity is there for them to win out, make the Big 12 championship game, possibly rematch with Oklahoma, possibly beat Oklahoma in that rematch, and do all of that so impressively that the playoff committee has to go, yeah, that Oklahoma loss early in the season for Texas was just a bump in the road. Not the same team that we just saw the last 6-7 weeks. All these games coming up are winnable games for Texas. Texas will be the favorite in every last one of these games down the stretch in Big 12 play. It's really, really tough. It's like, we talked before the season about, for Steve Sarkisian, this was one of those sort of pivotal seasons. This is kind of a opportunity to have a landmark, just a big type of season for his program at the University of Texas. We said, man, it's time for Sark to put up or shut up. He's recruited really well these first 2 recruiting cycles, which is great. The product on the field wasn't that good those first 2 seasons, but it improved over time. Season 1 to season 2, you definitely saw improvement, which is great. But now you've got this roster, you've got this coaching staff, and the expectation went from, yeah, we just want to see improvement to, it's time to go win the Big 12. And it's time for you, Steve Sarkisian, to go win 10 games. At least. That recruiting capital that he's had because of where he's coached and who he's coached for and some of the teams he's belonged to, some of the players he's developed. You don't do big things in this year 3, and I think you start to see some of that recruiting capital wear away. You can't just go get top 5 classes every single year because your name is Steve Sarkisian. Eventually, you got to put that talent that you're getting on the field, and you got to produce something that the market says this is what you should produce. And for Texas this year, it's Big 12 championship. It's possible playoff run. It's definitely 10 wins, floor. So what comes along with doing such a great job of building a program and building up a lot of talent in your program is the expectations that you're going to do something better than what you had been doing. We predicted 11-1 regular season in our 4 keys and a prediction for the second half of the season. We did that show on Tuesday. 11-1 is the mark, folks. And anything below that is a disappointment. There is not a single team left on Texas's schedule that should be able to play 60 minutes with the University of Texas. Period. It's what the college football world expects. It's what Texas fans expect. It's what the recruiting market expects. It's time for Steve Sarkisian to go do it. He's never won more than 9 games as a head coach. He has a huge opportunity to eclipse that by 2 just in a regular season. Got to get it done. Deep Dive Thursday, Houston Cougars edition. Number 8 Texas on the road at Houston. Houston just had a really, really big win over West Virginia last Thursday night. Exciting game. Game where they won it, then they lost it, then they won it again in super dramatic fashion. So that team's got to be kind of riding high. This game kicks at 3 p.m. Central Time on Fox. Texas is a 23-point favorite. They started out as a 21.5-point favorite. It's now moved to 23. I haven't checked it since probably Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, maybe yesterday I checked it. Not 100% sure, but I imagine it's right around that 23-point mark. Texas leads this series 17 wins to 6 losses, 2 ties. Strength of schedule of these 2 teams. Texas has an edge in strength of schedule. According to Sagarin, Texas's strength of schedule is a 75.7. Folks, I don't know what all goes into Sagarin's ratings. I haven't spent a lot of time digging into how he gets those numbers. I think it's all on his website, on his little text-based website. And the reason I use Sagarin is because Sagarin's formula has been around for a long time, and it used to be used in the old BCS, I'm pretty sure. You can go find all kinds of different strength to schedule numbers, and to me, I trust the longevity. If someone out there has a better strength to schedule system than Sagarin, let me know. I'm open for the new and innovative. So let me know. I do know that Texas's strength of schedule is top 10 schedule. Houston's got a 69.2 strength of schedule, which despite those numbers seeming close together, not really that close together. Texas's opponent's average strength of schedule, 69.9. Houston's opponent's average strength of schedule, 72.9. So a slight edge there in opponent strength of schedule for Houston over Texas. But the strength of schedules, Texas has the edge, and it's honestly just not all that close. Offensively, Texas rushes the ball for 185 yards per game. Their opponents hold people to 145 yards per game on average. And when I say their opponents, I say their opponents to date. So they've got a plus 40 run differential in the Horn Takes. I don't even know what I'm calling it yet, but I'm slowly building like some analysis tool for all these different statistics because I'm old and boring probably, and I don't got shit else to do. So my kids are all grown up. Texas passes the ball 300 yards per game, right on the nose. The average defensive passing rating or passing yardage for their opponents to date is 221 yards per game. So they've got a plus 79 pass differential. They're scoring 35 points per game. Their opponents hold people on average to 24 points a game, plus 11 scoring differential. 14 sacks allowed. 7 turnovers lost, but they're plus 1. Houston Cougars are rushing the ball for 135 yards per game. Their opponents are holding their opponents to an average of 135 yards per game, so they're flat 0 on that. They're rushing the ball exactly what they should be rushing the ball against their opponents on average. Which, by the way, folks, in these differentials, the higher the positive number, the better. The lower the negative number, the worse. It's not looking good for you. 276 yards per game passing for the Houston Cougars. Their opponents give up on average 241 yards per game passing. That's a plus 35 passing differential, which is about half of what Texas does. 29 points per game for Houston. Their opponents are giving up 25 points per game, so they got a plus 4 scoring differential, which is about a third of what Texas does. Sacks allowed 15, turnovers lost 3, but they are plus 7, those Houston Cougars. Defensively, and here's where the separation really, you look at those two things offensively and you go, yeah, they're not that far apart. 50 yards rushing per game, 24 yards passing per game, 6 points per game difference. And then you could look at those differentials and kind of tweak it a little bit higher for Texas in terms of who's more deadly offensively. But when you get to the defensive side, it really starts to separate in favor of Texas. 112 yards per game rushing given up by Texas. Their opponents are rushing on average for 148 yards per game, which is a plus 48 rushing differential for the Texas defense. Excuse me, that is absolutely incorrect. It is a plus 36 rushing differential. I don't know how that 48 got in there. It must have been a fat finger by me. I apologize for that. Texas is giving up 211 yards passing per game. Their opponents on average are passing the ball for 258 yards per game, plus 47 passing differential for Texas defensively. Texas giving up 16 points per game. Their opponents are scoring on average 32 points per game. So again, a plus 16 scoring differential for Texas. 14 sacks for Texas, not all that impressive. 8 forced turnovers, better than last year. The sacks are just slightly better than last year's. Tackles for loss, 5.8 per game for Texas. Houston Cougars giving up 162 yards per game rushing. Their opponents are only giving up their opponents are only rushing the ball for 156 yards per game. So they have a minus 6 rushing differential, which basically that just means on average, the Cougars are giving up 6 yards more per game than their opponent's average. 267 yards per game passing they're giving up. Their opponents pass for 256 yards per game. Minus 11 pass differential. 31 points per game given up by the Cougars. Their opponents are averaging 30 points per game scoring. Minus 1 scoring definition or scoring differential. So right there, all 3 defensive categories, Houston Cougar opponents are doing worse on average than they did against, or than Houston's average in those 3 categories is. And I promise I'll figure out a better way to say all this stuff later on down the line, but you get the point. Houston's got 10 sacks, 10 forced turnovers. That was kind of surprising. And they're also at 5.3 tackles for loss per game. So I think Texas is a little bit higher if you take the decimal out another place. But we're not going to do that. We're going to say they're dead even in tackles for loss. So you look at this statistically, and Texas just absolutely dominates the paper on both sides of the ball in this game. The only area where Houston's actually better, the forced turnovers, and they have less lost turnovers. So on paper, it's not looking too good for them Houston Cougars whatsoever as we head into this matchup. Tomorrow, we will have Sean's big question to the game. We'll have 4 keys to the game for Texas and a prediction on this Houston game. And as we go, we're gonna continue to build on this statistical analysis. I kind of like the stat stuff now. I don't know why. Never used to. Kind of into it now. Just trying to figure out how to take all these numbers and make them make any kind of sense that's worth listening to. That makes sense. Some of these things these guys put out, and I like them, don't get me wrong. We talked about Stats of War, at Stats of War on Twitter. This guy puts out, he's got some kind of formulas going, and he puts out some really cool graphics. I don't know if he does them for all the games. He does them for some of the games. He does them for all the Texas games, except for the Alabama game this year. I don't know what was going on with that, but all the other games, he's put out these little graphs that have just a ton of cool numbers and shit on them that I have no idea what it means. He has a score predictor on it. He has a percentage chance that one team will win over the other, just all kinds of stuff like that. And up until the OU game, they had been really, really accurate, like eerily accurate. And this week for the Houston Cougars, he's got Texas as a 94% favorite to win the game. I think the scoring is somewhere in the line of like 46 points predicted for Texas and 20 points predicted for Houston. So I don't know. We'll see how I saved it. I screenshot them every time I see them on Twitter with my phone. So I've got it. It'll be interesting to see how close he is again. And folks, I'm telling you, those first 5 games of the season first 4 games of the season, because he didn't have one for Alabama, really, really close on the score predictions of those games. Little random college football thoughts today. Yo, you guys know, man, this whole Colorado and Deion thing is one of the biggest stories. It's been one of the biggest stories in college football since, he took the job back in, I think it was in December, maybe November, definitely towards the end of last year. Deion takes this job. You got a whole new sort of group of fans that are now interested in college football that probably weren't interested in college football before. So there's been all this conversation, all this back and forth, and I participated in it. I mean, it's a big story. Sometimes there's just not a lot to talk about, so you got to talk about what the story is, especially during the offseason. So I spent some time kind of talking about Deion Sanders, and I had some good things to say. I had some bad things to say. Got a lot of negative feedback from a lot of people about some of the things I said that I guess they didn't like. But we've been talking, like, especially from the summer on, about, it really was when RJ Young got all upset because Colorado wasn't in the initial AP top 25. It really hurt RJ Young's feelings, and I was just like, man, like they won 1 game last year. And I know Deion turned the roster over, but even if you look at that roster, it's got some good skill players, but it has nothing on either line of scrimmage. And so these expectations that a lot of these new fans that are coming into college football had for this Coach Prime and Colorado's inaugural season under Coach Prime were just simply ridiculous. So, I talked about it. Like, it's insane. You guys are crazy. People were talking about how Colorado was going to win the Pac-12 this year, and Deion Sanders is going to have a top 5 recruiting class in this cycle. I'm like, man, y'all don't understand how this works. And so I talk about it on my show. I would clip things up, put them out on TikTok, and people would get all upset, just all pissed off, all upset. That's when I started talking about the cult of Deion. And at first it was just the cult of Deion. At first was just these random new college football fans that I don't think, in their defense, I just don't think they've paid that much attention to college football in the past. And that's okay. But they came in acting like they understood how everything works in college football, and they don't. But then it became, once the season started, the cult of Deion started to grab membership from members of the media, and not just RJ Young, which again, I don't know if that dude's really affiliated with Fox or not, or if he just has a show that's been long running and does. But not just guys like him that you see on Twitter and you see on TikTok, but people that are actually on TV started like joining these rituals of the cult of Dion. Michael Irvin, Joy Taylor, and I'm going to miss several others. There's lots of them. Stephen A. Smith. These guys all become like full-fledged members of the cult of Dion. And now, as the team is not doing, they started off great. I think they won 3 games in a row to kick it off. They won a big road game at TCU that honestly, man, I don't think you could have found one college football, like a legit college football fan, not a new cult member football fan, like just a guy or gal that's been a fan of college football for the last 20 years. I don't think you would have found one that would have said, yeah, Colorado's going to go beat TCU. So this was a big upset. This was like a big deal for Dion, big deal for that team, big deal for that program, big deal for college football. So the hype machine gets going. And man, it just never stops. You got guys, you got Travis Hunter getting hurt in a game and people wanting to murder the guy's family who hit him, people wanting him to be suspended for the whole year, people, just ridiculous shit. And again, this is not just run-of-the-mill new college football fans. This is media. You had Keyshawn Johnson come on a show and say that he knows for a fact, he was told that teams were working with Colorado State to try to beat Dion. Or no, Oregon. Teams were working with Oregon to try to beat Dion. That's how they explained away 42-6. Is all these coaches that hate Dion and are jealous of Dion, scared of Dion and what he's going to do in college football, big time Division I college football. All these guys, they said, man, screw our game planning for this week. We don't have to worry about our game. We're going to go help Oregon game plan to beat Dion. I cannot believe Keyshawn Johnson said that shit on fucking TV. And he was serious as a heart attack. So now everything's not going great. I think, let's see, Colorado has lost to Oregon. Colorado went ahead and lost to USC the next week. They got an overtime win against, I think, Arizona, one of the Arizona teams. Then they drop a huge game against Stanford. It wasn't a huge game. It should have been an ass kick, and they were like a 21-point favorite, I think, against Stanford. They're up 29-0 at halftime. Stanford comes back and wins the game 46-43. So at this point in the season, like all the shit I said before the season that people just bashed the fuck out of me about is 100% true about this Colorado team. But instead of these new media cult members, instead of them like really going after the problem, which is Deion Sanders and the way he conducts himself and the way he chooses to try to motivate his team and just, all the flash and all the hype and just all the Dion, the prime time, wrap it up in a bow and call it prime time. All the prime time is the problem. But no, Stephen A. Smith goes on TV the other day, blames the players for being too caught up in themselves. Y'all are too caught up in yourselves, Stephen A. Smith says to this Colorado football team, which is 100% correct. But then he goes on to, he takes it a step further and defends Coach Prime by saying, Coach Prime is prime time all the time, but he could do that because he's the best there ever was. Y'all aren't Coach Prime, which to some extent I would also agree with. There's probably 0 players on that team that are going to be near as successful in the NFL as Coach Prime was in the NFL. So again, to this point, I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but why are we defending Coach Prime? Coach Prime is the CEO of that freaking organization. What other team that falls flat on its fucking face is the media going to go after the players the way these guys have gone after the players this week after that Stanford loss and just completely give excuse after excuse after excuse for the head coach? I'll give you a hint, folks. That'll be 0. Coach Prime was one of the best NFL players that ever was. There's no doubt about that. But this isn't the NFL. And Coach Prime ain't playing. This is coaching. So he's not the best that ever was at coaching. And it's so obvious. It's sad because this same group of people have built up this cult. They've got all these people stirred up about primetime and how great this team is and how great it's going to be and how great Coach Prime is as a coach. And now all the things that anybody that was even a tiny bit skeptical about are starting to bubble up to the surface. And they don't want to put the blame on Prime. They gave Prime all the glory and all the credit when Colorado was doing really good. I mean, we're talking about the same group of people that put up grass for games for next week and show a player from the other school and put Coach Prime up there for Colorado. It's that same people. Same group of media people. Oh, Coach Prime. He's doing it. We love us some Coach Prime. Second, they fall flat on their face. It's the player's fault. And listen, he's half right. The players aren't focused at all. Most teams, the quarterback's the leader of the team. Shedeur Sanders not being a good leader. Shedeur Sanders seems way more interested in showing everybody his watch that he's wearing during the game, which, again, completely absurd. I mean, if you get sacked as much as that dude gets sacked, you don't need to be wearing any kind of jewelry, man, because you're messing it up. Which is probably like half his point by showing off his watch to everybody. He seems more interested in talking shit to the other team during warm-ups than actually leading his team. But guys, the players, they're just mirroring their coach. Coach Prime has come in there and other outside of the fact that he gutted that roster and brought in all these new guys, there's been no accountability for any of this shit. Travis Hunter ripping people's helmets off after the play. His son out on the field talking shit, saying he would fight everybody on the field and he would whoop all the coaches' asses too. You got his other son, Shedeur, running around showing people their watches, showing people his watch, taunting the visiting section or the student section of road teams, of teams when they're on the road. Man, if that was my kid, I'd drag his ass off the field. I've told my son multiple times, you do that again, and audibly where everybody else at this sporting event could hear it. You do that again, and I'm going to drag your ass off the field, and you're not going to play anymore. But there's no accountability. The showboating is 100% fine. And it's not about confidence. Somebody's going to say, oh, you're just scared of a confident black man. No, I'm not. I'm absolutely not. And you know what? That's not confidence. That's arrogance. That's jackassery. The sad part is, like, this team probably could have been a lot better than it's going to end up being this year. because they can't stay focused, and all they're focused on is the glitz and the glamour. I mean, the dude went and bought them all fucking sunglasses. The dude, I mean, there's cameras. There's nothing private about anything that's going on. There's no like internal team unity going on. Everything is for social media. Everything is to go on a documentary. Everything is for media consumption. And every single bit of that is on him. So when Colorado goes out and disappoints all you Colt members again, including all you Colt members in the media, don't go after the kids. All they're doing is following Coach Prime's lead. It's prime time, baby. It's prime time in Colorado, and every single one of those kids is living in prime time land. It's not their fault. There's an adult in that room, and his name's Deion Sanders, and he's doing all the shit that a lot of people said he does, and it ain't going to work, and now it's not working, and instead of blaming him, y'all are blaming the kids. That's horseshit. The other sad thing is some of those kids won't be on that roster next year because Coach Prime will go out and find some other kids that he likes better to come be on that team. And he's going to kick some of those kids to the freaking curb. And now what do they got? They don't have anything. They don't have anything they can take with them and try to build on except a bunch of bullshit hype. Caleb Williams, in one of the more interesting things I've seen in a very long time, comes out and says that he wants an ownership stake in the team that drafts him. And the first thing I got to think when I hear something like that is that a good move or a bad move? I really like the thoughtfulness of it. I don't know that another player has ever come forward and said something like that. I don't know that any of them have ever really thought about it that way. So I think it's an interesting idea from like a forward thinking perspective, like a, bet on yourself and be creative about how you go about negotiating your future compensation. I think that's really cool. I mean, it's a cool idea. But I think he's going to get served a really large glass of fuck off about that whole deal. I don't see any way possible an owner is going to give up a piece of his ownership stake so he can then draft Caleb Williams and pay him a ridiculous sum of money when odds are he's not going to pan out anyway. Most highly drafted quarterbacks don't do all that well in the NFL. These highly rated quarterbacks, these really high pick quarterbacks, are some of the biggest busts in the NFL consistently. I mentioned I like the thoughtfulness of it, but I think the timing was just. I'm assuming, I saw it this week, so I'm assuming that this came out this week. Dude, you just threw 3 interceptions against Notre Dame. Bad interceptions. Not like, man, that dude made a hell of a play interceptions, or I put the ball right on my wide receiver's hands and he just didn't squeeze it and it went up in the air and there was a Notre Dame guy there to catch it. Not those kind of interceptions. These were like really bad decisions to throw the ball. Interceptions. I'll be interested to hear what you guys think. Like, if you're listening to this, shoot me an email at horntakespodcast@gmail.com. I'm sure I'll clip this up and put it on TikTok at some point. Man, I want to hear from you guys. Is Caleb Williams out of his damn mind saying he wants an ownership stake in the NFL team that drafts him as part of his compensation package? My opinion is he's 1,000% out of his mind. But who knows? It's so crazy. It just might work. Tomorrow is Prediction Friday. We'll have our Week 8 Trace Ultra games. I glanced over who I want, but I haven't got into that yet. I don't even know who the 3 games are yet, but I got a pretty good idea. We'll have our 4 keys and a prediction for the Houston Cougar game. We'll also have some big questions of the game from Sean. Random college football thoughts. Somebody will say something stupid. We'll talk about it. Check out the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can find us on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. Follow and subscribe. Appreciate the support. Won't cost you a thing. You can email us at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your questions, comments, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. You guys have a good Thursday. Get hooked.